countercharges, confusion has reigned.
I was watching President Obama make a speech regarding his embattled healthcare plan when he mentioned a former health insurance executive called Wendell Potter, who had turned whistleblower over the industry's underhanded tactics.
All of this is in service of meeting what this former executive called Wall Street's relentless profit expectations.
Hoping he could shed some light on the health insurance industry's involvement in the uprising, I went to Philadelphia to ask Wendell Potter what caused him to speak out.
I was growing disenchanted with my industry and ultimately came to question the practices of the industry and the techniques that the industry uses to manipulate public opinion. I began to have, a crisis of conscience. But it took a visit to a healthcare expedition, as its organizers called it, in Wise County, Virginia. So just out of curiosity, I went up there, and I was just stunned when I walked through the fairground gates. I saw thousands of people who were lined up, and they were waiting to get care that was being provided on a charity basis by volunteer doctors and nurses in animal stalls and in barns. It became clear to me that this is really what so many Americans have to resort to get the care they need. And a big reason for that is because of the health insurance industry that I have been promoting all these years.
But Wendell Potter isn't any old executive. As head of public relations for two of America's largest health insurers, he oversaw the creation of many AstroTurf groups.
I was a representative of a health insurance company to all of these front groups. We had meetings on a regular basis, usually in Washington, but sometimes elsewhere, often near airports where people could fly in and fly out quickly. We would meet with the account executives from the PR firms to develop the strategy, to approve the tactics that were going to be carried out.
As a surgeon for over 30 years, I made a lot of tough calls. Congress is making tough calls on healthcare right now. Our healthcare system needs reform, but many in Washington support a government takeover that would limit patient choice.
Groups like the Coalition to Protect Patients' Rights are created to trick people through advertising and media appearances into believing that it's their fellow citizens and not the health insurers who are against reform.
The health insurance industry is very much like the tobacco industry. It's held in very low regard by the public, and they know that they have very little credibility themselves. So they have to establish these front groups to carry their messages for them. They do this so that a third party is telling the stories that they want to be told and getting the word out that they want to get out. And they always have names that sound like they could be some homespun group or some group that is really interested in the best interest of the public, but what they really are doing is trying to advance the agenda of the health insurance companies that I know about, but most people don't because they don't have my perspective. I spoke at a town hall meeting that was sponsored by or hosted by a congressman in New Jersey a few weeks ago, and there were a lot of teabaggers there, people who were there carrying signs, not there to ask questions or to listen to the congressman, but to disrupt the meeting. And there was a group called Hands Off My Healthcare. They were carrying signs saying, no government health care in this country, and hands off my health care. And it's misleading. No plan before Congress would have come anywhere close to a government takeover, but nonetheless, it's a term that the industry knew would be effective. Slippery slope towards socialism. In the United States, socialism still has this connotation of something that is akin to communism, if not even worse. The people who put those sentences together do it for a purpose, and they know that that will evoke a certain emotion.
You know, in about sometime in the next 60 or 90 days, this Senate and this House that meet right back at the Capitol behind us are going to vote on whether or not your health care becomes run by the government. And we want to make sure that in the midst of that debate, in the midst of that discussion, they hear from you.
They will.
And that's why you're here. That is why you're here.
I tracked down Hands Off My Healthcare at this rally in Washington. But unlike the fictitious groups Wendell Potter had helped to manufacture, this looked like a potentially new and far more effective type of AstroTurf. You see, Hands Off My Healthcare is actually an initiative of a real citizens group called Americans for Prosperity, who have almost 1 million members around the country. But their fear-mongering and blatant use of pro-industry messages left me wondering just whose prosperity these Americans were fighting for. I researched the group and found that Americans for Prosperity, or AFP, call themselves libertarians who engage citizens in the name of limited government and free markets. Along with a number of similar free market citizens groups, including one called FreedomWorks, they argue that private enterprise, not the government, should manage healthcare, not to mention most other aspects of the economy. While I'm no expert on America, there was something decidedly fishy about a grassroots group for capitalism. I mean, what kind of grassroots group hands out signs proclaiming that they are grassroots? And tell us about your other sign that I see there.
Oh, the sign. I am not paid to be here. We are here at our own expense, in our own interest.
While I don't doubt that their passion is genuine, I got the feeling that these activists were being played. Curious to find out just who was behind the group, I followed the tour to an early morning whistle stop in Maryland, where AFP President Tim Phillips was once again warning about the dangers of a government takeover.
And seeing 1/5 of our economy gone to the government, but just more importantly than the cost, which is big, our freedoms. The government will, in this case, take away healthcare choices and options and treatments and intrude itself into private healthcare decisions.
Another suspicious factor is that despite his straight-talking everyman persona, Tim Phillips is no amateur. With a list of clients that includes Enron, George W. Bush, and disgraced lobbyist Jack Abramov, Phillips has built a career as one of Washington's leading professional grassroots organisers.
Americans for Prosperity is a grassroots organization. We go out and get Americans from all walks of life involved to defend their economic freedoms. We educate Americans on, hey, here's the threat, here's what this health care bill is going to do, the takeover, and we just say if you want to get active, here are ways to get active. Come to rallies, email your legislators, call them, forward these communications on to your friends and family. And Americans are pretty grassroots oriented. They do that. They get involved. It's participation at really the most broad level, I think, in our country. And that's what we do at Americans for Prosperity.
And obviously Pelosi and Obama and such have been trying to ride or downplay a lot of this stuff as AstroTurf is the word of the moment. How do you respond to that?
It's backfiring on them. Look, so many Americans are now involved in this movement, by the millions, that Americans who are not involved, they listen to the president or to Speaker Pelosi deride and vilify other Americans as evilmongers or mobsters or AstroTurf, made-up anger, etc. And they know, well, wait a minute, I've got friends or family or coworkers or folks I go to church with. They're active in that movement, and they're not crazy. They're perfectly normal, great folks. They're just defending their freedom. So that charge is falling flat, but they're welcome to keep making it.
But the biggest indication that hidden forces were at work was the money that had gone into the campaign, such as the cost of sending 2 of these buses to over 500 events around America, not to mention the millions spent on a national TV ad campaign.
Tell Congress to vote no on government-run health care.
And while the Democrats did eventually get a healthcare bill passed, the campaign against reform succeeded in weakening it to the point that it did little to break the private health insurance monopoly. But it wasn't just healthcare that brought me to America. Coming from one of the driest countries on earth, I was especially interested in the debate over that other great socialist element of the Democrats' agenda, climate change legislation. With senators set to consider